Okay, I think that's everybody. Unless somebody else is jumping in. So I'm going to assume that you've all downloaded ParaView and you can open ParaView. It looks like this. It looks slightly different on Linux because Linux, but same generic kind of stuff. So to open files, you can either drag them in like every modern piece of software and just drop them in, or so like this will work. And you have to click apply just in general for things to happen in ParaView. If you don't want to click apply every time, you can go to preferences. On Linux is somewhere slightly different because Macs make Windows funny. And you can check auto apply on the preferences.
I wanted to ask you about that. So
is this being recorded? Okay.
Yes.
The thing that I'm most like trying to figure out workflow wise is whenever I double click a file, I made ParaView my default for PLY.
Right.
It doesn't auto apply whenever it opens the file.
That's right. So the reason that this is set up this way, and I'll show you, I'll turn on auto apply and that'll load the file automatically if you do that. Whether you want to do this or not, you can decide later, but I'll show it. The reason it does this is because ParaView is set up with scientific computing in mind and data processing from that, not necessarily looking at 3D scan meshes. So it's set up so you do a lot of things to configure whatever your view wants to be, and then you click apply and process all of those things at once. And for 3D scans, generally you can do auto apply because none of those things take very long. So it's not like you're sitting there waiting hours for something to render like you would be for one of these humongous scientific data computing sets. Like, for example, when I was running these things, I would get data sets that were hundreds of gigabytes. And our scans are maybe 100 megabytes or something, maybe a couple 100 megabytes for a really big one. So the order of magnitude is completely different. But when I show you something, it'll be clear why you would want to have auto apply turned off. So Nielsen, all we've done is open ParaView and load a file into it.
Okay.
So the first thing you'll notice when you load the file in is that the colors look funny. And that's because ParaView defaults to mapping things to a color bar, this one. So if you want to get the real colors from a scan, you need to go down to, well, you have to click this little gear icon, which turns on the advanced settings. And then you can scroll down to scalar coloring and uncheck map scalars, and it'll give you the real colors.
Neat.
So that's just a kind of, again, it's not really built for doing 3D scan mesh kind of thing, so you have to turn that off. So then I guess the next kind of useful thing is knowing how to interact with the mesh. So if you left click, you can rotate whatever direction you want. Zooming, scrolling. If you're on a touchpad, there's you have to do like command and shift and click to do all these things. I suggest using a mouse. And you can pan by middle clicking, so like the scroll wheel, and that just lets you translate stuff around. So none of that's super different from anything else, but if you want to make the buttons do the same thing as MeshLab or something, you can change it in the settings so they correspond to the same thing, just so you're not like getting confused and doing slightly different clicks for every different software you're using. Or if you just want to learn a bunch of things, then you can do it that way. So those are kind of the defaults. We probably won't ever use the 2D ones, but they're a little bit different. So on the rendering part, there's a little toolbar right above it, and it's got a 3D in it. You can change it to 2D by clicking that, and it'll flatten the image. Whoa. Which I don't know why we would ever need to do that but it's helpful for looking at things sometimes just to get like the 2D projection. So those are kind of the basic interacting with things.
Can I ask on that,
Yes.
the 2D thing? I know
Yeah.
you've like rendered volumes before as like the whole volume. Is 2D maybe like a way to configure a slice, or is that, I'm not asking you to do that, I'm just asking if
So 2D
can't
is
use
like
that.
whatever view you've got rotated, it just kind of projects it flat into the screen.
Oh,
So it just looks like, now I don't have any like, I can't rotate it that way. I can like rotate it side to side. It looks like, it just makes it look like a picture that you took from the,
Yeah, I accidentally put it in that mode the other day and I couldn't translate around the thing, and I was like, what the fuck is happening?
yeah. So it's just kind of it's useful for some things, but I can't think of one that would be useful for what we do. It's useful if you're like making a movie or something and you want to look at a particular view all the time to project it into 2D, so you don't get you get artifacts from like what angle you're looking at things if you have it in 3D. So it's useful for like showing something with a particular perspective. So the other kind of useful things that are, if we know what orientation the scans are, these axis kind of arrow directions at the top will switch your view to align with the axes, which is not super useful for scans unless you know what axes you want. But it's sometimes good to have a point of reference that you know what the orientation is. And the other thing you can do is if you hold down X, Y, or Z on the keyboard, it'll fix that axis. So like right now, I've got it where Y is up and X is positive and going to the left. If I hold down Z, I can rotate it just in that XY plane, which is useful for kind of making things a little flatter,
that is
like
very
lining
useful.
things up. And you can do the same thing, like if you hold Y down, you'll rotate it just in the XZ plane. So that's just kind of a nifty trick that's not very well documented. I'm sure it's buried in there somewhere, but and the last thing that's kind of useful with just moving things around and orientation and stuff, I think this is kind of new, so if you got this out of like the Ubuntu repository, you might need to download a newer version. But there's this camera with a plus at the top. If you click on that, it'll save the view that you're currently in. So if I like shuffle it around and decide I want to go back to that, I can just click on that camera that I made.
I definitely don't have that.
I think that's, I mean, I have the most recent release right now, so Ubuntu's like a year and a half behind or something. Last time I looked at it.
There's a camera undo.
Yeah. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to mention. There's two undo buttons on this. There's the camera undo and the undo up here. The camera undo undoes like rotations and stuff like that, which you'll find that you use a lot more than the undo some sort of other action that's at the top.
Yeah, Control B, you can just toggle through the previous camera motions.
Yeah, because if you're anything like me, you're going to like accidentally bump something out of orientation that you didn't want to do or something, just because you like haphazardly clicked on something. Okay, so
John, I'm gonna have to be annoying. How did you do the color point cloud again?
okay,
Were you
so
even paying attention?
No, I
you
was
have to
formatting
have
your document.
Oh,
you have to have the advanced toggled on. So it's this little gear thing, and
that's
then
easy.
under scalar coloring, like you should always have that on. There's no reason to like not have the advanced ones on, I think, but I don't know.
Cool, thank you.
But there's just the map scalar thing that you can uncheck and it'll make it look like the real colors.
Excellent.
Okay. So let me review my notes and make sure that was everything I wanted to say. say about just kind of generically moving stuff around and getting to something that looks right. There's got to be some more weirdness with point clouds, but I was going to save that to the end. So now we might want to do something. Well, I'm going to do one more thing that's just kind of a cool thing. That so there's an animation toolbar in here under View. So you can do Animation View, and it'll come up with this bar at the. It might be on the side for you or on the bottom. I always put my, like, you can drag these around and put them in different places. So I don't know that I've got it in the default settings anymore. But you can add a so this is just something that's interesting for, like, if we made a 3D model and we wanted to put a GIF up or something, you can add a camera to it and tell it to orbit. The settings tell it how it's orbiting, and you have to like do a lot of math to figure it out. So I always just use the default ones. It's not easy to figure out. But if you just click the default ones and change the mode to real time, then the duration, just how long it's going to last in seconds. And you can click play.
I'm going to be annoying like Cole. How did you get that camera, the orbit setting thing?
So you click, let me just clear all of this out. So you go down to, there's a camera option on the animation toolbar, and you can click orbit. There's other options, like you can give it a path to follow and stuff like that, but that could be helpful. Just more complicated. Sweet. Click plus, just click OK. It seems to do a pretty good job of making something reasonable most of the time.
That's awesome.
And then do duration, and you can click play, and it'll rotate stuff around. So this is kind of an easy way to make, if we wanted to make a movie of a scan or something like that, that just rotates it around.
Yes.
And you can go to File and save animation and save it as a movie.
Nice.
So that's kind of a nice, quick way of.
What the hell?
You can also change just the color palette. There's a little palette icon up in the top. This is also something that they've been improving recently. So if you have an older version, it might not work quite right, but you can change it to like white or something like that. And the nice thing about these is it changes all the font colors and everything like that of labels, if you've got labels on there, to something reasonable for the color.
Oh, it also crashes if you change it to gradient.
Does it? Yeah.
That
may be this is definitely something that they've improved in the recent releases. So if you don't have the newer one, I've had this experience where it crashes when you do that, and I can't explain.
Okay.
But just in case you care about what the background color is, you can change those kind of things, and you can make your own if you have some other color preference. So I'm going to close this animation thing out.
Did you already cover this? But how do you pan?
You middle click.
Middle click. Oh, that's why you said you need the mouse. Got it.
Yeah, it's like it's either Control or Shift click with a.
It's neither.
It's not.
Neither.
Oh wait, Shift right click.
Oh, cool. That's going to be remapped.
Yeah, so I mean, you can change these in the settings to be whatever you want. And my suggestion is you make them the same as MeshLab or something else that you're used to using, so it, no learning curve there.
Yeah, it doesn't break my brain.
So that's kind of just basic kind of like just rotating things around and stuff. And so the next thing I'm going to do is use a filter, and I'm going to use Decimate. So if you go to filters, there's a lot of categories on here, and it turns out most of the filters aren't in any category, which is super annoying. So you can either go to alphabetical, where it will list them all, or my personal preference is you do search and you start typing in what you want. So if we want to decimate it, you can start typing decimate until you get decimate and click that.
Oh, cool. And that's a nice little hotkey too.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, where's the search? What's the search?
It's filters, and then there's a search under filters.
Okay.
Control space.
And this is why auto apply is bad. As you see, mine's just spinning because it's just going to apply the default decimate, which this is a mesh with, so if you go to information, you can see how many cells and points there are. So this has 2 million triangles in it. So it takes a little while to do the decimate, which, okay, that's not a horrible thing. But now what happens is if I change the reduction target to be 80% instead of 90%, it's going to run it again automatically. So if I do that, now it's running, it's going to take 20 or 30, whatever it takes.
Does it do it from the beginning?
Yeah, no, yeah, it does it from the original mesh every time.
Oh, nice.
And now if I want to click preserve topology, it's going to run it again. And if you have auto applied turned off, then you can change all these settings and then click apply and only do it once. So that's kind of the reason that the default is off.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing these operations and want to change 3 settings, you have to do it 3 times if you have auto apply on.
Yeah.
For most things, this is one of the slower ones I'm going to do. So a lot of things that's fast enough you won't even notice it.
So question, is there a way to make map scalars off by default?
I am not sure.
Because I applied the decimate and then it went back to the like diverging color palette thing again. And I was like, well, this is, what did I do? Okay.
I am not sure about that.
Okay.
Mine did not seem to do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, yours did not do that, but mine also did.
But maybe I've just run this so many times in the last hour that it.
Oh, no, there's an option to say save current settings as default next to the properties.
Okay.
What?
So if you expand your palette a little bit on the left side,
Yeah.
The like toolbar thing that all these things, properties, information, all this is sitting in, there's a little save icon there.
So I must have done this at some point in time.
Yeah. So I will try that and we will see.
There's 2 things we can look at here. So the target reduction, I think, is pretty clear. It's just how much of the mesh it's trying, like if it had 100 points, it's trying, with 0.8, it's trying to get rid of 80% of them. So the bigger the number, the more it tries to get rid of points and make a finer mesh. For ours, we pretty much always want preserve topology on because it'll make the shapes look more like they originally were. And the angle feature basically tells it how big of an angle does it need to be before it says it's a different shape. So if you make it smaller, it'll have more triangles. And I assume the boundary vertex detection says something about don't overdo the edges or something like that. But if you hover over stuff, ParaView is pretty good about saying what the settings are, even though sometimes those comments are completely unhelpful if you don't know what it's actually doing. But they're there. So when we've got this, we might want to say, well, you can toggle between the 2 meshes and say which one looks better. Obviously, the original is going to look better because we decimated it. But an easier way to look at both of them is you can click up in the render view above it. There's 2 little windows with a bar in the middle of them. So you can split this window either horizontally, if you click this one, or vertically. So you can, whichever one you prefer, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it this way. So if you click that to split the window into 2, and then click render view, it'll bring up another render window. And if you click on that render window and then click the little eyeball next to decimate, you can view the decimate in that one, and it's going to change colors, so you have to click it again, which is annoying.
Not if you
and
save your
then,
default preferences.
well, yeah.
Shizzle.
So on the original window, I'm going to click that and click the eyeball on the original mesh, and uncheck the eyeball on the decimate, just so I have the original mesh in one window and the decimated in the other one. So you can independently kind of rotate these around just like before. But if you're comparing things, it's nice to have them do the same thing, and you can do that by right-clicking in the window, either one, it doesn't matter, and click Link Camera.
Oh, nice.
And then you can click the other window, and it'll make them both do the same thing.
I feel like I missed a step again.
So
how'd you get it in the second pane? Oh, it's the same window.
click the other window.
What the hell? Oh wait, you have to click it to.
Yeah, you have to like select them and view the meshes in them independently, because you can have both meshes in both windows. So like the first window I've clicked on, so it's got the blue border around it, and I've got the original mesh turned on.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
Mine just didn't
okay.
load instantly,
Yeah.
so
you can zoom in and look somewhere and say, hey, I really kind of decimated this more than I should have in some areas, if you want to. And you can highlight the mesh. Instead of having up at the top, there's in the middle bar, there's this one that says surface. If you change it to surface with edges, it'll show the mesh.
Yeah.
The original one's really fine. And then you have to like click on the decimate and click on the other window, and you can change that to surface with edges, and you can see that mesh too. So you really have to zoom in to see the mesh on the fine one that was originally. So this is 1 millimeter scanned with Scandy Pro. But if you zoom out, it's just a blue mass because it's just sees the mesh.
Is there a way to have it spit out, like in a toolbar or something, the number of faces and points?
So if you go to properties on there's an information tab.
Mm-hmm.
It'll tell you the number of cells, which in this case is the triangles, because that's the only thing that should be in the mesh is triangles, and the number of points.
Oh, cool. You
know.
can pull that out and move it somewhere else if you want to.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to have these like this. This is my personal preference but you can break them out so they're like separate windows too.
Oh.
Neat.
So if you wanted to have a bigger screen, you could have all of these on you could have them on one screen and have all the rendering stuff on a second screen and so forth. But so that's kind of the basic way to decimate, and just generally the flow for most filters. I'm going to go back and change my preferences so auto apply is not turned on, just so I don't have to like deal with that. And I'm going to turn on the just only view the decimated mesh. Okay. So another thing we might want to do is cropping. There's a bunch of ways you can do cropping in here. The way I like to do it's with the clipping tool. So there's these boxes above the pipeline, and at least in mine, the first one's clip. So that'll default to clipping a plane. Let me go to properties.
John, did you go over how to unlink the cameras?
I just closed the window.
Okay.
Let me.
Brilliant.
That's one way of doing it. Let me open it up and see if I can.
Well, this is nice.
Yeah, I just burned it.
This is what we need to make Scandy's plane crop.
Yeah,
so,
Nielsen. Oh, it's fine.
What?
So
Ah.
this one's one that's kind of good to have the auto apply on because you can kind of see what you're doing as you're working. But you can, so the green side, I always forget which side is which, but you can change the direction by grabbing the normal and just kind of rotating it around. And then you can change where the plane is by clicking off, well, clicking kind of like, let's see if the border of the plane, and it'll just move along that normal. Like you can't move it in another direction. So if I want to crop out the rocket, I can, kind of start like that, and I'll click apply, and I guess the right side. It's magic. But if you guess the wrong side, there's an invert, and it'll delete the other side of the plane. So if I unclicked invert, now I've got the other side.
BTK volume texture mapper 3D was deprecated. Thanks.
Bollocks.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. It gave me some deprecation warning.
Yeah.
Where's invert?
You maybe need to have it. No, you don't have to have advance on. It's below the plane parameters on mine. And it's a checkbox. Crinkle cut kind of just, it's not going to make a difference here.
It's called inside out on this one.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice of them being consistent. Crinkle cut kind of follows the mesh line instead of the just straight cutting, which may be useful to somebody. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can change it so you don't have to use planes. So there's a box, a sphere, and a cylinder. So if I want to select the rocket, it's kind of cylindrical shape. So maybe I want to use a cylinder. So I'm going to change it to a cylinder. And the interaction's kind of the same. You can move it, you can click the center dot to move around the center, and the normal to like rotate it. I don't know of a way to like the radius you just have to type in as far as I know. Maybe there's a way to scroll or something.
Oh, okay.
But
wow.
From experience, I know that 0.07 works because I tried this before I started. And it's also easier to do it from the back side of the. So if I can get the center in.
Daggone nifty, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I tell you what. Wait, how did you lock it about a certain axis as you were rotating it?
Frickly diggly. Couldn't.
You click on the axis. You mean how was I dragging it?
Yeah, like as I'm, yeah.
So there's a dot right in the center.
Uh-huh.
So if you click on that, you can drag it around.
What if you can't get the dot?
The downside of that is if you get it inside of something, you can't ever click on it.
Yeah.
And the only way you can kind of get around that is to like manually type in a position for the center. At least as far as I know. But it's got like handy like aligning, so you can align it to the x-axis, y-axis, or the camera axis. So if you kind of line your camera up right first, it'll kind of align right for you, which is sometimes easier to do than messing with this. So I'm pretty close. I'm chopping off a little bit still. So I move that up and then click apply.
Be inside out.
And the other thing that's important to do when you're using the clip tool, after you're finished, it has like this show cylinder on the cylinder one. It's got show plane on the plane one and show box on the box one. Uncheck it and it'll go away, because if you leave it there, 100% guarantee you'll eventually like click on it and change how it was oriented and mess up your selection.
What was that last thing, to disable it? Because that was important and I heard you, but didn't.
Yes. So on the cylinder, like right under the parameters, there's a show cylinder checkbox.
Gotcha. Cool.
Uncheck that.
Cool.
Or if it was the box, it would show box or show plane. If you leave it there, it'll leave these axes and stuff, and you'll eventually click on one of them when you're like rotating stuff around, and you'll move it.
Yes, I will.
I know this because I've done it a bunch of times, and it's a pain in the ass to go back. So that's kind of a nifty way to select things.
Hell
now-
yeah.
There's kind of, this is one of the quirks with ParaView is, which you'll know if you've been doing the VTK stuff, is a lot of the filters only work on certain types of data. Like they only want to have poly data or something like that. But if you do one of them, it might return a point cloud or instead of poly data. So after we did this clip, if we wanted to run a smoothing filter on this, we could go to filters and search for smooth. And it's grayed out because it returned a data type that the smooth filter doesn't work on. Which is, this is going to happen a lot if you kind of use this on a regular basis, because as you've seen in VTK, sometimes it doesn't return the type you think it should. So at least for 3D meshes, the way around this is almost always just to run. Oh, that's a real doorbell.
Yeah.
Thought it was Zoom. The way around this is almost always run the extract surface filter. So if you go to filters and search again, there's an extract surface. And I don't know what any of the settings on this do. I never change them and I just click apply. So now we've got, that changes it back into the right data type and we can run most of the filters on it again. I really wish you didn't have to do this. But that's just the way this stuff works.
That's just the way it is.
It's just like if you did selection stuff in VTK and code, you have to like, the selection filter tells you what the indices are, but doesn't actually take anything out.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can go to search and find smooth. And so this does Laplacian smoothing. There's not a whole lot of settings, just the number of iterations and the convergence is, I think it's the maximum amount it lets a point move. So if you set a smaller number, it'll smooth it less, I believe. If you set a bigger number, it might smooth it more. But if you do something like,
Yeah, I can't really see anything until I go like above 100.
so again, this is again where it's helpful to kind of split it out into two, and you can look at
What?
The original surface.
What?
And you can tell that it's different, but like it's not drastically different.
It's easy to see it if you select color by solid color. Because with
Extract
the
surface didn't get applied.
topology, it's,
Yeah.
or with the,
Oh yeah.
like the
No, I have
vertex
to be in the
color
right
and torches.
window.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean it depends on where you're looking, but it's definitely smoothing it. It's just I kind of smoothed this a little bit before I gave you guys this file. If you're looking at my file, so I cleaned it up a little bit in MeshLab, just because.
So kind.
Yeah, I didn't want to send you a 100 megabyte file with a bunch of weird edges in it and stuff. So that's how you do the smooth filter. Generally speaking, anything that you can do in VTK is somehow accessible through ParaView. There's a lot of filters that aren't kind of nicely built in, which is kind of unfortunate, but there's a lot more filters that show up in plugins that aren't enabled by default. Most of the plugins they've got are for doing like fluid dynamic simulations or something, so they're not super useful for us. But one other thing I wanted to do, and we'll see if this works, it crashes a lot on me, so I don't know how reliable this will be, but we can
That's the
measure
question
distances.
I had before you possibly crash it.
Yeah.
Saving your setup,
Yes.
is that easy?
that's a good question.
Yes. So you can go to File and Save State,
Mm.
and it's got two options here. So you can save it as the ParaView state file, and that'll save it as something that you can open it up and it'll reload and it'll work. If you save it as the Python one, you can do the same thing, reload it with the Python thing, but the Python one's fairly human readable, so you can actually pull pieces out of it and work on it from the Python script.
So it gives you like
Is-
BTK code.
Yeah,
She.
so
Cool.
it's like, I'm not sure there's a downside to using the Python one. It seems more useful to me just in general. Maybe it's, I don't know.
And the ParaView program can load the Python state one too, right?
Right. So let me just do that, and I wish I was not on Mac.
Don't say that too loud.
Well, because the Mac won't let me open two ParaViews.
It's gonna hear you.
That's evil. You can't open two of these at the same time?
Okay, whatever. Because like if I was on Linux, I could open two ParaViews and load it up in a different ParaView without destroying where I am. But we'll hope for the best, and I'm just going to close ParaView and reopen it and
Lame.
load state and load my Python file.
Ruby.
And it's going to take a second because it's going to rerun all the filters and stuff.
Because each one of these steps is non-destructive.
Right.
Very cool, fam.
And
Very
hopefully
cool
this wheel will
indeed.
stop spinning and I'm back where I was.
Look at that rocket.
Kind of.
But the nice
confused.
thing is the state file is pretty human readable. So you can go through and like pull stuff out and reuse it for other things if you want.
Like your iterations.
I don't know if this is super helpful, but if you had a bunch of meshes that were basically the same, you may be able to kind of use this import file to batch process them or something.
Yeah, buh.
But so I think the Python's more usable for that, just in the sense of you can read it and maybe get something out of the file. And if you're just loading it in to get exactly the same state back, it doesn't matter which one you choose. But I think there's no disadvantage to choosing the Python one, and there is for choosing the ParaView one, just because you can maybe use the Python one for something else.
Cool.
But who knows? So one thing we might want to do is measure distance. So I don't know if I added this here. There's a ruler. Do you have that in the toolbar, or did I move that there?
It's there.
Okay, so the like normal distance you can do with the ruler, and you can specify the points with clicking on somewhere and clicking P for the first point, and then clicking on somewhere else, and it's Command P on the Mac. I assume it's Control P or Alt P or something on Linux, and that'll let you select the 2 points that it's going between.
Sweet.
And then you click apply and it'll tell you how far it is, which is, we know this works because we've got it built into the app, but same thing. But there's another way to measure distance, which I highly suspect is going to crash when I try it, but we're going to hope for the best. Because this just measures the distance between those 2 points in a straight line. Like you can see that if I rotate it, it goes through the mesh.
Mm-hmm.
But
you can lay it along the surface?
You can lay it along the surface.
Well, son of a gun. What is that filter called? Because have I done it?
So this is probably not going to work. Every time I've tried it today, it's crashed. I've used it in the past and it's worked. So I don't know if this is a version thing or if it's something with the mesh, but we're going to try it.
We're feeling lucky.
So I'm going to delete the ruler just so I can follow the steps exactly. Yeah, we're going to hope for the best. So I'm going to go to sources and go to geometric shapes and click a polyline source. And I'm going to put the points where I want them. This is slightly different. I have had less luck. The like P and Control P don't seem to work quite as well on the polyline source, but Like it's a different command set. So it's Control P here, and then if I select the second point on the bar, then I can click over here and do Control P. Maybe.
It's also saying in the properties dialog that you can use Control left click to insert a new point at the mouse position. So that's what I did, and then it just like deleted I went through and deleted the original ones.
Okay. Well, I've had very kind of inconsistent luck with this placing points where I want them to, but
oh yeah, it's not going into it's not projecting onto the mesh. It's just in space.
Yeah. So this is just a separate thing. It's just a line.
Maybe
P should just be in space, and on mine it says Control P to snap to the closest mesh point. So there's two different deals.
Nope.
Look, you son of a gun.
But
we're just gonna delete this one and start over.
yeah, so I have a really hard time with this, but it eventually works sometimes. Okay, I don't care that I'm putting points in. Stop complaining. I'm going to start over also.
He does not work now.
Nothing works.
So, okay. So it gives me 2 points just by default. I'm going to select one of them. I'm going to click on my mesh where I want it. Then I'm going to hit Control P, and it's not going to do anything. If I click P, it does. I don't understand.
You have to select the point you want to move. Got it.
Yeah.
Neat. I was being
Like
dumb.
this is something that's not super consistent. Like how you select points from object to object in here. But so got the line between, I hope, are 2 points on the mesh, which is maybe why it's crashing, is I'm not actually getting a mesh point. So then this is going to be in something that's not enabled by default, I think. So you have to go to Manage Plugins under Tools. And there's a geodesic measurement plugin, and I'm going to load that. I've told it to load this by default 100 times, and it still doesn't do it. But
where was that? In Tools.
And then Plugin Manager.
Plugin. Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's a geodesic measurement one, and load that.
Wicked.
And then we're going to go to Filters and search for geodesic measurement. And this is a somewhat annoying thing. So we have to click Input here, and I'm going to choose that to be the smooth poly data. And then you have to click Endpoints and choose the line. And then we're going to see if it.
It's not oh, I have to have the polyline selected?
Yeah, so on input, you want the smooth selected, and then you want to check endpoints and select the polyline.
Hey, I just arrived. Can you all start over?
We recorded it for you, hopefully.
Classic.
I'm gonna have to watch that recording because I fucked up. Ruby distracted me.
Then we can click OK and cross our fingers and click Apply and hope it doesn't crash. And it crashed.
I'm impressed already.